sorry that you waited 10 minutes. My apologies. We thought it was at 3:30. I was still having great fellowship and prayer with Pastor Philip until one of you rang me. So it's good of you. I hope you have a great time of attending one of the workshops. How many of you enjoyed the workshop? Okay. That's great. Amazing. Where did you go? Man, beautiful man. Oh, how we met? Wow, okay, from this. Someone with a freedom pass. How did you met? Well, without further ado, let's warmly welcome Pastor Philip.
Yeah, we're having great fellowship together, and while you were hot in discussion, we just went for a nice walk down the river, back again. We were just like comrade in arms, you know. You have a wonderful pastor, you know. It's a great heart for you all and a great spirit. So it's just a joy to be here. I can't tell you how I've enjoyed being very much in ministry to you this Easter conference. And I know many of you, you've been hungry for the Lord, and many of you, God has begun to deposit something into your spirit. And I know many of you, God will do a transforming work in your lives. How many of you, God has spoken to you, you know, during this time of Easter conference? You feel that the Lord has just touched something, spoken something into your life. Yeah, the Lord bless you and use that for His glory. Okay, begin to see. I just want to follow what the Lord wants to do today. So I'm coming to the last of the last two parables. I'm going to tackle these last two parables very quickly. The parable of the oil, the 10 virgins, and the parable of the sheep and the goats. This really is about the grace to seek and the grace to share. So the grace to serve, the grace to sow, the grace to seek, and the grace to share. These four things together represent spiritual singularity in our lives. So I would like to talk firstly about the grace to seek the presence of God, God's glory and the poor. Here it is. The 10 virgins, the parable of the 10 virgins. Can we read it together? Read it loud so that I know after a cup of tea, you know, you'll probably feel energized. So let's read it loud together. Verse 25. Ready, go. Then the kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. But the wise took oil in the vessels with their lamps. But while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight a cry was heard, "Behold, the bridegroom is coming. Go out to meet him." Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise answered, saying, "No, lest there should not be enough for us and you. But go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves." While they went out to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. So, the grace to seek the presence of the Lord, that's the glory of God. What is it? What is the glory of God? You know, many of us think that the glory of God is like nuclear fission. It's thermonuclear fission. It's like a big, huge atomic explosion. Or it's something like a furnace of fire. You know, once I saw an eclipse of the sun, total eclipse of the sun in Malaysia, and I waited for the eclipse, and you know, then the whole sun was covered by the shadow of the earth, and was it the shadow of the earth or shadow of the moon? And that was the eclipse of the sun had taken place, and then you just waited. It was an eerie kind of thing. Everything became sort of dark, red, and the birds they stopped singing, and then the insects buzzing just came out from the jungle. You know, the insects started buzzing, and it was incredible. It was an eerie kind of feeling. And suddenly, the first flash of the sun came through as the moon passed, and it just like blinded your eyes. You think, wow, that's the glory of God, or something like that. You know, it just blinds your eye. And yet, when you read the scriptures, you will know that it is not the effulgence. It is not that blazing light that is the center of God's glory. It's not that made Isaiah, you know, cower in fear. When the time that Isaiah cowered in fear before the glory of the Lord, as he saw it in the temple in Isaiah 6, it was not that made him say, "Woe am I, for I am a sinful man, and I come from a group of people with unclean lips." It was not the brightness of the light. The center of God's glory is His moral holiness. It is the otherness of God is His absolute holiness. It is that will just fizzles out. That will just wipe us out in smithereens when we come anywhere near. That is what made Isaiah, probably the holiest man on planet Earth at that point in time, say, "Oh, am I? For I am undone, for I am a man of sinful and unclean lips." And yet, when the glory of God is encountered, it is an incredible thing. There was, many of you know that Alexander Fleming, stumbled on the discovery of penicillin, largely by accident. He came back from his summer holidays, and he was working in St. Mary's Hospital in Paddington at that time. And he was looking at his petri dishes, which are for growing bacteria. He had forgotten to dispose of these petri dishes, these bacteria culture plates, before he went off on his summer holidays. And so, when he got back, all these culture plates, this agar, was just full of bacterial growth, and they were completely useless. So he began to clean his, get rid of all his petri dishes, clean up his laboratory bench, and just throwing all his culture plates away. And then, because they're full of bacteria, then suddenly he came across one particular culture plate. And he looked at the culture plate. Instead of being just full of bacterial growth, it had no bacterial growth on most of the culture plate, except in the rim. And the center of that culture plate was a mold. It was growing. So somehow or other, the presence of this mold had prevented bacteria from growing around it. Now he could have thrown that plate away easily. Accidentally came across it. He was about to throw it away, then he stopped and looked at it. And he examined it, looked at it again closely. And he decided to examine that mold. He surmised that that mold must be producing a substance that was killing the bacteria, inhibiting its growth. And he examined that mold, and he found that it belonged to a genus called Penicillium. And therefore he named the yet unknown substance which this mold was producing, that was inhibiting bacterial growth and killing the bacteria. He named it penicillin. And thus, in 1928, Alexander Fleming stumbled on one of the greatest discoveries of modern medicine. The first magic bullet that could kill bacteria without killing human cells, penicillin. And one of the greatest discoveries. And for that, he won a Nobel Prize in the 1940s. He shared a Nobel Prize for the discovery of penicillin. He stumbled on human glory, and its glory. But 2,000 or 3,500 years before penicillin was ever discovered, before Fleming ever discovered penicillin, another person stumbled on a glory as well that was far greater than penicillin or Fleming's. And his name was Moses. He was working as a shepherd in the backside of the Sinai desert. And one day he was looking after sheep just like before. And then one day he came across a bush. And lots of burning bushes in the desert. There's nothing uncommon. But he saw that this bush was burning, but it was not consumed. And just like Fleming, he decided to stop and take a look, instead of just passing by. And just like Fleming, he stumbled into a glory that was far greater than himself. He stumbled upon the glory of God. And that was Moses. That's how he came and met with God. And God said and spoke to him out of the burning bush, "Moses, Moses." And Moses said to God, "Here I am." Now, that glory of God that Moses encountered, the Hebrew word for that is the word kabod, which means, and the Greek word for that is the word doxa. Kabod actually means weight, W-E-I-G-G-H-T, weight, the heaviness. Doxa in Greek for glory actually means the resplendent effulgence of something, the splendor of something. So the glory of God is really the overwhelming weight of His presence and His renown, seen in His resplendent majesty, His beauty and His splendor. That's what the glory of God is. The center of this glory is absolute moral holiness. It's not so much of thermonuclear fission. It is this that defines the glory of God. Today I want to speak about this oil of the presence of the glory of God, which is what the virgins sought. The virgins who had extra oil. grace that God gives to us to be always ready for the last days, that you must be filled with the presence, the glory of God. What attracts the glory? Now, how is it that some people, they're filled with the glory of God? Others, they have such a problem, they never see the glory of God. Just seems so distant from them. What attracts the glory? Well, let me tell you a story of a man called Ray Sullivan. Ray Sullivan worked as a park ranger in Virginia, in the US. And, he holds the Guinness Book of Records, world records, for the largest number of times a man has been struck by lightning and actually survived. Any human being is struck by, any one of you has been struck by lightning before. I mean, some people do survive. Anybody has ever been struck by lightning before? Can I see your hands? Okay. Yeah. Well, most people, when they're struck by lightning, they never survive. Okay. But Roy Sullivan was struck by lightning 7 times. And he survived. All of them. Okay. One time, his head caught fire. Another time he was struck by lightning, all his eyebrows burned. Another time, somebody lost all his toenails. Another time, all the hair on his legs burned. But he survived them. Sometimes he got minor burns, superficial burns, some not quite bad burns, but he survived all of them. And then, somewhere along the line, that's over 20 or 15 years of being struck by lightning 7 times. And then, lightning couldn't kill him. And then one day, he fell in love. He fell in love with a fellow park ranger. And he was just pursuing her romantically, but she rejected him, jilted him. So he went into a spiral of depression. He went to depression. And as a result of that, he committed suicide. So what lightning couldn't do 7 times, a woman just once. Which goes to show women are more dangerous than lightning. Okay, what's that? But what was it that attracted lightning to Ray Sullivan? What was it? Now we all know what attracts lightning. Per se, physics, we all know that, tall structures, and all that. Lightning gets attracted to them because of the negative electric charges and positive electric charges from the Earth, and as they come closer and closer together, the charge is so great, and suddenly a streak of electrons just come down, and the positive charges go up and meet, and tall structures attract lightning. We all know that. If you're on a golf course and there's a great cloud that comes, there's lightning warning and siren goes off, you've got to get off. And you never stand under a tall tree during lightning and so on. We all know that. But what attracted lightning to Ray Sullivan? Nobody knows. But what attracts the glory of God, the presence of God, to people? What I've found in the Bible, that there are 2 kinds of people that the lightning is always attracted to, the glory of God is attracted to. Firstly, it is attracted to people who have surrendered their lives. In other words, they have died to themselves. They just want God in their lives. They just want their lives to be yielded to God. Sure, they have got responsibilities as parents or parents or siblings, or responsibilities in their work. They got responsibilities, in their families and so on. They got responsibilities in their life, but they just want God in their life, and they're surrendered to God. And Moses was this. Somewhere along the line, Moses, he was working in the backside of the Sinai Desert, and he had 40 years, the Bible tells us. He was born and raised up in the court of Pharaoh. He was raised up in the court of Pharaoh, became a prince of Egypt, and then he tried to kill an Egyptian slave. He killed an Egyptian slave driver and had to flee for his life, and then lived as a fugitive in the backside of the Sinai Desert for 40 years. And in that time, all his arrogance, his pride, and everything about himself, the Prince of Egypt, God got Egypt out of Moses. Everything about the pride and arrogance of Moses was removed from his life. He just became a no-name agrarian peasant, a shepherd, anonymous in the backside of the Sinai Desert. When he had died to himself, when he had surrendered his life, the glory of God appeared to him and said, Moses, Moses. It was the same with Abraham. When God appeared to Moses and said, Moses, Moses, Moses said, here I am. You can read it in Exodus 3. Here I am. Everybody say, here I am. And it's amazing because when the glory of God appeared to Abraham, Abraham, as you know, had promised from God for a son. And that son eventually was given to him when he was 100 years old. And Sarai Sarah, his wife, was 90 years old. They had their child, their promised child, Isaac, came to be. And then one day, we don't know how old Isaac was, but one day, God said to Moses to test him. When everything that he wanted, because there's a promised child that God had given to him. Through this child, the nations will be blessed. God will make the tribe of Abraham like the stars in the sky, the sands in the desert. And this was the child, the precious child. And God said to Abraham, Abraham, I want you to take your son. Yes, sir. Your only son, as if he didn't know. Yes, sir. I want you to take him to a place and I want you to sacrifice him for me. Yes, sir. And then, as you know, he brought his son to the mountain called Mount Moriah. We don't know how old the son was, but probably the son, but we know the son was old enough to engage in conversation with him very innocently. So probably, your guess is as good as mine, maybe 5 years old, maybe 7, 8 years old, that kind of age. So he tied his son up, put him on a stone altar, and he was about to slay his son. And the son said, Dad, where's the sheep, the lamb that you brought? My dad, where is it? Oh, God will provide. And then, you know, so where's the fire for the altar? Oh, God will provide. Son, don't you worry, God will provide. And that must have been pain in his heart. But he was prepared. He had died to himself. He prepared to sacrifice his only son. And the Bible tells us that it was with Abraham, and he probably, you know, the pain in his heart, I don't know what happened, but you know, if I was a father and I had to do that, or I can imagine for Abraham, he probably had to distract his son first. You know, probably tied his son up. He probably had to distract his son. And the son would probably say, Daddy, where's the lamb? Oh, don't worry, son. God will provide. And son, did you see that? That's an eagle flying there. You see that? That's an eagle flying. And the son would probably say, oh, it's right, Dad. And that's the time Abraham, we are told, pulled out his knife. It was about to plunge it into his son, and suddenly the angel came and said, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham dropped the knife. And he said these words that Moses actually said of people who have died to their lives. Here I am. Read it. Abraham said the same words. It's the same with Jacob. Do you know, when Jacob was running away and cheated his brother Esau, and then eventually he came back being a rich man. And then God met with Jacob. You know, and God met with him in a dream and said, Jacob, Jacob. He had learned his lessons. He had died to himself because when he had been away in the land running from his brother, he had worked for his uncle Laban for 14 years. And Laban was a bigger cheat than him. And he cheated him out of many, many things. And yet God had prospered Jacob. And Jacob knew God had prospered him back. He didn't deserve it, but God had prospered him back. And so when on his way back to meet his brother Esau, back to his home again, escaping from his uncle, his dreadful uncle Laban, God met him in a dream and a vision and said, Jacob, Jacob. And you read again in Genesis 31 verse 11. Jacob said the same words. Here I am. Here I am. It is the dead man's cry. It is the surrendered man's cry. That is why when God identified himself in the Bible, he called himself the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You see, these were men who had surrendered their lives. I found that one of the things about the glory of God is attracted to people who have surrendered their lives. God just loves speaking to them. It's almost like people who have died to themselves. The second group of people are people who are hungry. They value the presence of God above everything else. They're so hungry and longing for God. It's like 10 virgins seeking. This is one of the things that God calls us to seek the presence of God. And in Exodus 33, it's Moses, you know. It is said that he went up to the mountain and he came down. He was so consumed with the presence of God. The Bible tells us he did not know that his face had begun to shine. There was a glow on his face. He didn't even know that. And the old English word for that word he did not know in the King James is the word which is not used today. It's the word wist not. And Moses wist, W-I-S-T, wist not that his face shone. Now that word is an unusual word. It's only used one other time in the Old King James Version of the Bible. And it was when Samson had his hair cut by Delilah. Do you know that? And he had lost his strength. And we are told the presence of God had left Samson. And Delilah shouted to Samson in his sleep and said, Samson, wake up! The Philistines are upon you! Just as she had done before. And Samson sprang out from his bed to subdue the Philistines, his enemy, just like he had done so many times before. And the Bible tells us this very sad phrase. But Samson wist not that the glory of God had departed from him. He did not know. Now, you see Moses. He came down from the mountain having spent 40 days and nights with God, hungry for God, and he wist not. He was so consumed with God, he didn't know his face glowed. He wist not that his face shone like a light bulb. So much so that the whole of Israel, when they saw Moses, they had to put on the sunglasses. And he had to cover his face up with a veil until the glory faded. He was so full of God, he didn't know. I once had a friend like that. He was a very good friend of mine. He lived in Reading. And many years ago, he told me, his wife told me the story. He spent 3 days fasting and praying in his room. You know, and then at the end of that 3 days, when he broke his fast, he came out of his room. His wife was about to bring him a tray of tea. And his wife stood at the bottom of the staircase and looked at him. And the glow was on his face, and the wife just dropped the tray. All the tea and everything else, and said, "Oh, Tom, you've seen God, you've been with Jesus." And his face just shone. You know, sometimes you met people like that in your life, haven't you? You just shake their hands, you just go near them. You're just so aware of the presence of God. You met anybody like that? You met people like that before? Maybe your pastor is like that, yeah? The presence of God, yeah? And you know what? You know, when I come here and say, I want to go near these people, you know? That's why I hang around your pastor quite a lot, you know? I just like to go near these people. Because sometimes the presence of God is on them. You just hope that some of that will just kind of rub off you. Do you know what I mean? Now, this is the thing about the virgins. The 10 virgins, again, 5. The wise virgins, they actually accumulated oil for themselves. Because oil evaporates, oil goes stale, oil leaks, so the presence of God, oh God, they're hungry for God. They're surrendered to God and the presence of God. Now, why is this presence so important? I told you yesterday, the presence of God is so important, the glory of God is so important because, for the simple reason, that in the coming last days, when the false prophets come by, everybody, you won't think, oh, I know who the false prophets are. It's not so easy. It's the presence, you know, the genuine presence of God. You're able to discern between that and the counterfeit. Because Jesus told us in Matthew 24 about the last days, that God shortened this time for even the false prophets to come. Because if not, even the elect, the Christians, widespread Christians, will be deceived. It's so easy to be deceived. So, here's the thing. How many of you are hungry for God? Can I see your hands? How many of you want to surrender your life to God? Can I see your hands? Lord, I just pray that it would not just be a show of hands. I pray today for your wonderful holy presence. Lord, let your presence just come right now where they're seated right now. Lord, as we come to the end of this time, this conference together, may they meet with you. They may not meet with, you know, a speaker or nice good points or jokes, but they may meet with you. That's my desire. That's our desire. We may meet with you. We may meet with you. Oh Lord, you're beautiful. Your face is all I see. And when your eyes are on this child, your grace abounds to me. You know the presence of God when you taste it. You long for it. It's nothing that the world can give. It truly isn't. Quantitatively, qualitatively, in every way, it's something different from this world. And you know when it fills you, you just have a deep sense of eternity. You have a deep sense of purpose. You have a deep sense of freedom. You have a deep sense of joy. It's so separate from this world. So unbound. You know, and that's what the glory does to you, the presence of God. But because we come and we minister in the kingdom of God, you know, I want to show you something that's very, very important. That you must understand the difference between the anointing and the presence of the glory of God. Okay, the anointing and the presence. So many people actually say, the presence of God is here. I can sense His presence, and I just sense the presence of God is there to heal. What they really often mean is, there may be a presence of God, but often the power of God is present to heal. Now, I want you to understand, in the Bible, many of us think the presence of God is the power of God. No, it's only one aspect of the presence of God. It may not necessarily even be the presence of God. What is the anointing? The glory of God is His presence. The anointing of God is His supernatural enabling in our lives, the supernatural power in our lives to do His work. That is the anointing. Okay? But many people think that the presence and the anointing are the same thing. Isn't the presence and anointing the same thing? I want to tell you that actually, no, they're not the same thing. And I'll show you from scriptures. The glory of God always carries His presence, because the glory of God is the manifest presence of God. So by definition, the glory of God is the presence of God. It's the manifest presence of God. Everybody can know that God is present because it's His manifest presence. That's the glory. The glory of God carries His presence. Whereas the anointing may be without His presence. Oh, you sure about that? Well, let me just give you some examples where the anointing of God can operate without His presence. Now, Judges chapter 16 verse 20 tells us the story of Samson. It is. What was Samson's anointing? Samson's anointing, what was the supernatural enabling? His strength to do the work of God as a judge of Israel. That was his anointing. When his hair was cut, we are told the presence of God left Samson. The presence of God left. The presence of God no longer. But when Samson's hair grew back, we are never told that the presence of God came back to him. His strength came back. His anointing came back. So you can divorce the presence from the anointing. Give you another example. In King Saul, Saul was anointed to be king of Israel. 1 Samuel chapter 16 verse 14. He was anointed to be king of Israel. That was his anointing. But you know, we are told, because King Saul disobeyed God, we are told the presence and the glory of God left King Saul. But he was still king. He was still anointed as king. And that's why David, when he saw King Saul, even though the presence of God was no longer there, he said of King Saul, I will not touch the Lord's anointed. The anointing of kingship was still upon Saul. The presence was no longer there. But an evil spirit came upon King Saul, we are told it. So much so that David had to go before King Saul and play the harp to chase out the evil spirits, we are told. So here's another example in the scriptures. You can separate the power of God, the apparent anointing and supernatural ability of God, from the presence of God. It's very important for us to understand this. And here's a third example. You know, Elisha. You remember Elisha? Elisha died. And you remember that? And he had been dead for many years. And there were some people who were burying someone, a dead soldier, next to the grave of Elisha. You remember that story? 1 Kings chapter 13 verse 11. And they saw the Moabite raiders coming down from the mountains just to attack them. And in their desperation, you know what to do? They just threw the dead soldier's body into the grave of Elisha, where some of the bones were sticking out. And the Bible tells us, as soon as this dead soldier hit the bones of Elijah, he sprang up to life. Now, how could that happen? The anointing was still in Elisha's bones. But don't tell me the presence of God was in Elisha's bones. The anointing was still there. Therefore, the Bible tells us in the Old Testament already, you can separate the power, the anointing, from the presence of God. I've shown you scripturally that that can happen. And therefore, it is sometimes possible. That's why you can see men of God. Here's men of God. Sometimes you are ministers